These valve stems are not good. They're amazingly not good, and they'll have to be replaced. But because of the cracks in the top of them, they're not going to be that easy to get out. My favorite tool for getting these out is one of these, and it just goes in an air hammer, and it has a slight angle on it, so it forces the top of the valve stem in, and it's less likely to mess it up. These are already messed up, so who knows what's actually going to happen. I'm going to try with one of the less messed up ones first. And you have to be really careful when you do this to make sure that you don't end up smacking the top of your valve seat. These are actually recessed pretty far, and I'm not sure how much further I can go down. But I'll take them down as far as I can, and then we're going to come up with a plan B. This one did not go well. I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to get that out. That did not want to come out. I mean, there's close to the camera, and there's close to the camera. Let me just move that a little bit. And that's these split ones. The split part of it is just jamming into the top. You don't get this at all when they haven't got those splits in them. I haven't seen many that come split like that, to be honest. Oh. And again, I hit the camera. There's a fine line between having a camera where you folks can see what's going on and it being in the way all the time. I think that might be the actual nature of YouTube. Yeah, these are just normal. You can see how far each one of them has come down. The really bad cracked ones have not come down as far. But I don't want to damage these seats with the chuck and the air hammer. And they are pretty loose now. So I'm wondering if I could just drift this through without damaging my bit. So brass mallet time. Yes. Let me get this out of the way. Those drip trays are not the strongest thing in the entire world, and I've broken a few of them now by dropping hammers and things on them. So I have a valve guide out. And it hasn't really damaged it that much, considering. They're a great little tool, those. You can pick them up from Goodson's, and I would assume Beam and places like that. I think I get all mine from Goodson's. These are coming out okay. Okay, now we're on to one of the ones that are split. I don't like that at all. It feels like I'm not going to get it back, is how it feels. So I'm going to just grab a drill bit that is similar size to this, so that it will just go in and make a little chamfer and clean up that top edge, and then hopefully I can actually get the bit back. So 3/8 doesn't seem to be a million miles away. I think they were the only two bad ones. Ooh. Okay, I'm going to continue taking the others out. And you can hear that difference in tone when I'm hitting them. Those two split ones, not for coming out. I mean, they're going to, but they don't want to. Okay, so everything's pretty good. Except for these. I really want to try not to hit this GoPro with a hammer. Yeah, and even though I drilled that, still doesn't want to let go. See how messed up the top of that is. Not happy, guys. Okay, last one. I really don't want to keep hitting that face either. Okay. It's out. I didn't like it, but it is out. I will clean all up inside here later. I wanted to get these out so I could get in at the bottom, and I'll either go in there with a laser cleaner or just a wire brush on the end of a drill and clear all that out. Something else I'm going to do with this block is I'll go through every single one of these bolt holes, and I'm going to run a thread repair tool down it. Now, thread repair tools are very different from taps. A tap will go through and cut out any material that's in the way. That's how it forms a new threaded hole. A repair tool actually moves the threads back to where they were. So you can end up with still a strong hole through there. All bets are off a little bit when you're dealing with cast, because cast is way more likely to break than reform, but you still have a little bit of wiggle room. You can buy these sets really cheap, and they're a good thing to have. And just don't always reach for a tap in this situation, because these will work way better and leave you with a stronger hole. There will be a stud to remove here, which I'll just use the standard washer, then nut, then weld, then take off technique. We've all seen a million times. If you folks want a video showing that, let me know and I'll do one. But I need to know whether I've got to deck this. My gut feeling is probably, but it may not be terrible, so we've got to evaluate it. First step for that, with this being clean, there is no point doing this unless the surface is completely clean, is to check for straightness. To do that, you need nothing more than a feeler gauge. See if I can get it small enough. There we are. So I am going to use that size, thinnest I've got in here. And a lot of the time when you look through specs for each one of your engines, it'll give you maximum warp over various areas, and you can use that size if you've got a little bit of a warp and see if it passes. For me, any warp's not great, so I will tend to deck them because it's easy and cheap for me to do. And I'm using a straight edge. And a straight edge is a little bit more than just a steel ruler. It's actually a machined surface. And if you're gonna use a steel ruler for this, and you can at a pinch if you've got nothing else, check it on a flat surface by putting it on both ways and make sure that there's no bow and it is straight. But you'll find it a lot easier with one of these thick straight edges. Again, not crazy money. So go diagonally across it. Make sure it's flat down there. And make sure you can't get the feeler gauge underneath it. Now, if it's got a warp, you shouldn't be able to get it underneath in the center. If you're getting it underneath at the edge, there's something strange going on. But you want to go in both directions. You want to go across the cylinders. That's okay. Sometimes I'll go in a little way, but not all the way. And that can be how you've got this rocked, you see. So that's fine. Again, across here. And I do the edges. And then we want to go in this direction as well. All right, so this block is perfectly flat. So the next question we're going to ask ourselves, has it got any dings in it, any cracks, holes, all that kind of stuff? Magnaflux on these cast blocks works brilliantly. You also got the spray crack detections, where I tend to use a lot of, and they're okay. But they're about the only thing that I know of that works with aluminum or aluminium. But there is a cheap, easy at-home test you can do that will give you an idea of how good or bad a surface is. And this is a little bit confusing because it's so weird looking from the cleanup. And I'm sure there's a load of you sat here thinking, why is he doing or setting up for machining operations on a block that's already been painted? Wouldn't you paint it afterwards? Well, I've got reasons for doing it this way around. If I paint this as soon as it's come out of the degreasing process, whether that's the laser clean or the hot tank or whatever, if this is prepped and painted, no oil can get back into it from the honing process or any of my machining processes. If I take the bare degreased block and then take that through and bore it and hone it and deck it and do all those kind of things, with cast, you don't use any lubricant when you're boring or decking actually. But you use lubricant when you're honing, and it's an oil, and it'll impregnate itself back into this metal. And then that's between your paint and the surface, and it's going to mean that your paint does not bond as well. So just doing it in this order and doing the enamel primer, ceramic enamel primer, and then the ceramic enamel paint means that any oil that I've got here will just go over my finished surface, and if I scratch it or mess it up, even though this is pretty tough, I can touch it up super easy, but I'm not dealing with that whole oil impregnation thing a second time. If I've got a super questionable block, you know, like somebody's brought something in that's already 40 over, it's got a ton of wear, they want me to take it to 60, and I'm not sure there's enough meat in there, that's probably the only time that I will put something on and bore it first. And if it passes the bore, then it'll be painted before it goes into the honing cabinet. So that's kind of why I do it in this order. So for the next stage, this is old school. And I've noticed, it's funny, and you see this a lot more in the UK. A lot of old school engineers over here there do this. Here in the States, people can be a little bit sniffy about dykeming and stoning. They feel that it's inaccurate in some way, and actually it's incredibly accurate. You can take a freshly machined surface and dykem it and run a real light stone over it, and it will still show you every single one of the cutter imperfections. You're dealing with such a tiny amount of material, and as long as you're not stupid when you're using it, you know, if you use a bit of common sense, this can be an incredibly useful tool. And I like to use dykem and stones for diagnostics a lot, because it takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't take any money whatsoever. You can get this anywhere. I think we probably got this particular bottle from Amazon 10 years ago, you know. It goes a long way and it'll drip everywhere. So you don't end up with a load of this gunk dripping down your painted surface. Always put the brush in the center first. It comes off really, really quickly and easily with brake clean, but do you want brake clean on your paint? Probably not. Right, we're going to leave that to dry. If you see any bits where you've got a bit too much on it, it will take way, way longer to dry in those parts. So just try and smear it around a bit. Okay, I've given this about 5 minutes to dry. It's not completely dry, but it's close enough for this. It'll smear in a little bit. Also gave me a little bit of a chance to straighten up that camera and align it again, because it always really annoys me when I come to the edit and notice that I've knocked it off, because I'm a little bit OCD. It messes with me. So all you need for this is a sharpening stone. Use a new one that you don't use for anything else. You don't want one with tons of chunks knocked out of it, or, you know, horrible stuff embedded into it. I have one that I use just for this kind of thing, and you want the rough side first. I know you're thinking, well, how can this be accurate? You're doing it by hand, but when they used to make really, really high precision molds, they were all machined and then hand finished. And back in the day, the only way you could ever get anything truly, truly accurate and flat was with hand finishing. So what we're doing is we're just taking off literally the dykem. We're taking off so little material here, but you need to run it in a figure of 8. Plenty of honing oil, and you'll be running through until you can start to see. You don't want any pressure on here. And you want to make sure that you're using it an equal amount on each part of it. when we come to wipe this off. We're going to see that the low parts stay blue. You can see here where we still have blue in all the places, and it highlights any damaged areas. I normally use a spray honing oil, but I was just using that little bottle because I had it and I thought it'd be easier on camera. But the spray one seems to leave a more defined finish, so that's kind of interesting. And once you've gone over with a rough stone, you want to try and then take it back to the smooth. Get rid of any of those stoning marks that you've put in there. We're starting to see what parts of the surface are okay and are a pass. We're not seeing any big cracks in here. And this was a lot worse looking than it actually is. But it's really clear. Let's see if I can get a bit more definition for you. There we go. It's really clear, any low spots, they just stick out. But so far there's nothing on here that's really scaring me. I could deck this really easily, of course, you know, we have the equipment and machines, and if it was a customer's, honestly, it would already be decked. But when it's my own stuff, I'm weirdly sentimental about keeping the old stamps and then the original stamping of the engine number. If I deck this down now, I would lose that original, really badly, let's be honest, stamped engine number. I would lose these piston fit numbers where they measure in, and I believe they used to stamp these numbers in so they knew what size pistons to put in there based on the size of the bore after they'd finished honing it. But just decking stuff for decking stuff's sake, I'm not that into. If a customer came in and it was a good surface and it didn't need decking, I wouldn't do it. And in fact, quite often I've refused to ruin engines just by taking material on them for the sake of it. This is slightly different because something that looked this bad, you would deck anyway, you know, it kind of needs it. But I actually think this will come up with a stone, and you can see here the gasket, as was, the marks. And that shows you how much material we're not removing. And as we go through this, we'll start to see the original cutter marks. But this area here is where you tend to relieve anyway. So this is not important. This is all underneath in the combustion chamber. So anything inside of here, even those marks, are not an issue to anything. And I will probably end up relieving them down 60 thou anyway, just to give it a little bit more power. So I'm going to continue honing. Wrong spray bottle. You can see how used to using a spray bottle I am. I take some of the, slightly lighter than this actually, I take some of the honing oil out of the sunning cabinet over there, and I have that in a bottle, and that's what I use for this most of the time. Now if you get an area with a low spot that's not cleaning up, your temptation is just to keep going over that low spot and almost forget about the other stuff a bit, and you can't do it. You've just got to keep going over the whole thing with your figure of eights. And don't worry if your figure of eights aren't totally perfect, it doesn't matter that much. It's just to keep it even, but do them as much as you can. We'll send you a little bit crazy though, because you do like 8 in a row and then you suddenly forget how you do a figure of 8. You can see what direction this is going in now, and you get an idea of the process. It takes a little bit of time, but you can go through and you can save so many surfaces this way without having to resort to decking stuff. I'll be continuing with this for a little while, and I'm not going to shoot all of that because nobody wants to watch somebody hone for an hour, but I believe that this is savable and it's going to be fine. And as long as I keep stoning this and going through, it'll come up with a surface that is going to seal perfectly, and I'm not going to lose any of my original stamps. And when something's borderline like this, it's always worth trying it and evaluating. And I think this is pretty good. So the next thing I want to evaluate is this head. It's the one that came off this engine that I got from Larry, and there's two things I really like about this head. One of them, you'll notice that F Ford and then GPW. This is an actual GPW head, and I'm guessing it's probably the original head, and then they bought... Actually, no, that makes no sense, does it? I don't know why it's a GPW head, because the Jeep that this came out of wasn't a GPW, it was a CJ. So I've got nothing. I have no idea why it's a GPW head, but I am super happy that it is a GPW head. Again, this is weird staining here, that's not actually flat, there's no problem with that. And I'll stone that as well. I have this to deal with, which I will drill out with a left-handed drill bit. Again, mention in comments if you want to see that process and see how that works. And this needs evaluating. I'm going to do it over here, so you've got it on this camera. Although I don't typically balance stuff on engine stands like that. So let's see if this needs to be decked. Well, let's see if it's warped. It might still need to be decked. Oh, okay, so we got some movement there. Oh no, it was the way I was holding it, and that will happen sometimes. Again, is that warp? Just barely something across there, so that's... So I'm going to check that at 2 thou. So I'm seeing 2 thou across there, which is too much for me. Yeah. Okay, so that's a fail. So we know that we're going to deck this, so I'm not going to mess about stoning any of this because it's all going to get decked off anyway. So we've learned quite a bit from this evaluation process. We know that the guides were complete and utter garbage, so it's fantastic that we got those out, and they came out pretty easy, really. Even the split ones could have been a lot harder. The head is a legit GPW Ford head. Super excited about that. And it is slightly warped, about 2 thou, so we are going to deck that. The block itself can most likely be saved just by stoning, and there's a really good chance that I won't have to deck the block. You can use that stoning process on pretty much any flat face that's machined if you want to evaluate it and see if it does need further machining from a machine shop. Or even if you just want to, if it's a project where it's not that critical and it's not worth sending it in or spending the money to have it machined. And I'm sure my fellow machine shop owners won't thank me for saying that, but it's a reality. You know, stoning is not the bad thing that a lot of younger engineers and machinists make it out to be. It's a legit technique that was used for a very, very long time, and you can get some spectacularly accurate results with it. I think that this block can be saved that way, and I'm going to continue with it until I've got it happy. And if for any reason it doesn't come good, I can still deck it. Nothing's lost. You're taking off such a small amount of material, there's no real loss there. Next on this, we're going to install the valve guides. We're going to put new guides in it. We're going to grind up all these seats. It has got hardened seats in it, which is fantastic. So they'll be touched up, and we'll test those and do a proper vacuum test on them and make sure that everything's great. And then we can get this engine built back up and put in the Jeep, which is just out of shot over there, and get running around and driving in it, which I'm super excited about. Thanks for watching, and thanks to everybody that subscribes. We really do appreciate it.